So good afternoon, everybody. Definitely excited and humble to be with you all today for the little amount of time that we have to talk about this thing called Brave Space. And so before we get started and before the PowerPoint comes up, I want to be brave for a moment and just have some real conversation. To first introduce myself, Dion Jordan. I am the director of the Office of Equity and Multicultural Services for ODHS. I've been in my role now for about a year and a half, but I've been in this work, it feels like my entire life. And so definitely excited just to engage in this type of conversation. So as I was saying before, I do want to take a moment to be brave, to put some disclaimers out there and also kind of set the stage around the time that we have. Because believe it or not, we have about 90 minutes. You're only going to hear from me for about 25 of those minutes. The rest of the time, it's really about a dialogue. It's really about a conversation. And so what's tricky about this conversation is these are conversations we normally don't have. It's called, we're talking about cultivating a brave space, but really a big piece of this is learning how to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And that's going to be such a big piece of what's going to take place today. And so in this conversation, one of the things that I tell people around uncomfortable conversations or difficult conversations, I'm gonna out myself. I'm 51 years old, okay? And so growing up, I was always taught from my family and others, there are just three things you don't talk about outside of the home. You don't talk about politics, you don't talk about race, and you don't talk about religion. Now here we are all grown up, and we don't know how to talk about politics. We don't know how to talk about race. We don't know how to talk about religion. And it's so important to be able to have these type of conversations. And so today, in our dialogue and conversation, you're going to have the opportunity to get a little bit uncomfortable. I don't want to scare anybody because you're going to have the opportunity to put your toe in first, right? Because you only go in as deep as you would like to go in these conversations. But each question that I bring up will give us the opportunity to go a little bit deeper. The disclaimers that I need to share are, one, when we talk about disability, when we talk about race, when we talk about some of the more difficult and personal conversations, first, the thing I want to make sure everybody understands is we're all coming here in a different place in our journey, right? Let me use race for an example. What's interesting is when you have people who are talking about race, for people of color, when they talk about race, oftentimes they talk from a place of how far we need to go, how much we still need to get done, how much, further we need to get in this conversation and in this work. Typically, or generally, not for all, but those who are not people of color usually talk about how far we've come, what we have accomplished and what we have done, which is great too. But what happens when those two come into the same room? And one has a feeling of urgency and we've got to go further, we got to do better. And others might have the feeling of, hey, we're doing pretty good, we've come pretty far. They may not be at the same place, in the conversation, and then all of a sudden it might feel like there's a tension that's taking place. I want us to just to recognize that things like that can happen in a space. Likewise, let's take 9/11, for example. If you were somebody that was there when 9/11 took place and you inhaled the smoke, you saw the red on the cement, you felt the tension and everything that was taking place, it's going to affect you differently, right? Then if you were living in France or across someplace else in the world and saw it on the news, where it might be more in your head thinking like, wow, what a tragedy, how could that happen? For one person, they're feeling it in their soul because they live it every day. For the other person, they're trying to process it because they didn't experience it, but they're learning, they're trying to find out, right? Same thing in these conversations. For some people, it's a lived experience, some of the things that they're sharing, and they feel it to their soul. To other people, it's not a lived experience. And so they're trying to process and understand it. There's nothing wrong with the person who's trying to process and understand it. There's nothing wrong with the person who's feeling it and might be a little more emotional around it. But once again, they're in the same room, trying to share in a conversation. And the reason why I bring this up is this is one of the things that makes it so interesting to have these type of conversations, and why it's important that we all enter this with grace, and we all enter this with humility and a curiosity to learn and to also get better and to do better and to be better. And so with that said, let's go ahead and jump in. You all might have questions that come up. I'll have areas where I'll stop and be able to look at the chat. When you all are in breakout rooms, I'll have a chance to look at the chat and look at some of the questions. So when you all come back from breakout, I can address some of them. But once again, I really do want to try to get past my presentation piece, because the meat of our time will be in small groups, just having some real conversations. And remember, that's all we're doing. We're just having conversations, right? So I hope everybody can feel calm and know that, that this will be a brave space. So with that said, Missy, if you could share the PowerPoint, we are good to go. Okay, we can get past that. That's just a colorful page. We can click to the next one. Here we go. Takeaways from our time together. This is what I hope happens. Establish awareness of the humility, the courage, and the grace it takes to have brave conversations. Explore brave space versus safe space, right? Kind of heard a little bit about both. What's the difference? Which way should we go? Learn the rules of engagement when having complex conversations around race. Understand what to do when the conversation goes wrong. Sometimes we make mistakes. Sometimes we might say something that might be offensive. Sometimes the conversation just went wrong. What do you do? We're going to talk about that. And then most importantly, we're going to practice having complex conversations around race, and not just race, but also around some of the other dimensions of diversity where we have intersections, okay, or intersectionality. So we'll go to the next one. Now, I just ask that you be brave, be kind, be true, and be you. Last but not least, I didn't have any handouts for this because I really wanted to be more of a conversation. But what I am offering, though, is this PowerPoint to everybody afterwards. So all my notes, things that are being shared are in this PowerPoint. So you all will have the opportunity to have this PowerPoint. Okay, so we're going to jump in on a video that really talks about being uncomfortable, being colorblind versus being color brave. And so if we could start the video, this will be our intro to some good conversations to come. Good to see y'all. Y'all good out there.
About that story. And in many ways, the moment caught me off guard, but deep down inside, I actually wasn't surprised. And so it's 2006. My friend Harold Ford calls me. He's running for U.S. Senate in Tennessee. And he says, Melody, I desperately need some national press. Do you have any ideas? So I had an idea. I called a friend who was in New York at one of the most successful media companies in the world. And she said, why don't we host an editorial board lunch for Harold? You come with him. Harold and I arrive in New York. We are in our best suits. We look like shiny new pennies. And we get to the receptionist and we say, we're here for the lunch. She motions for us to follow her. We walk through a series of corridors, and all of a sudden we find ourselves in a stark room, at which point she looks at us and she says, where are your uniforms? Just as this happens, my friend rushes in. The blood drains from her face. There are literally no words, right? And I look at her and I say, now, don't you think we need more than one Black person in the US Senate? Now, Harold and I, we still laugh about that story. And in many ways, the moment caught me off guard. But deep down inside, I actually wasn't surprised. And I wasn't surprised because of something my mother taught me about 30 years before. You see, my mother was ruthlessly realistic. I remember one day coming home from a birthday party where I was the only black kid invited. And instead of asking me the normal motherly questions like, did you have fun or how was the cake? My mother looked at me and she said, how did they treat you? I was 7. I did not understand. I mean, why would anyone treat me differently? But she knew. And she looked me right in the eye and she said, they will not always treat you well. Now, race is one of those topics in America that makes people extraordinarily uncomfortable. You bring it up at a dinner party or in a workplace environment, it is literally the conversational equivalent of touching the third rail. There is shock, followed by a long silence. And even coming here today, I told some friends and colleagues that I plan to talk about race, and they warned me. They told me, don't do it. There'd be huge risks in me talking about this topic, that people might think I'm a militant black woman and I would ruin my career. And I have to tell you, I actually for a moment was a bit afraid. Then I realized the first step to solving any problem is to not hide from it. And the first step to any form of action is awareness. And so I decided to actually talk about race. And I decided that if I came here and shared with you some of my experiences, then maybe we could all be a little less anxious and a little more bold in our conversations about race. Now, I know there are people out there who will say that the election of Barack Obama meant that it was the end of racial discrimination for all eternity, right? But I work in the investment business and we have a saying, the numbers do not lie. And here, there are significant, quantifiable racial disparities that cannot be ignored in household wealth, household income, job opportunities, healthcare. One example from corporate America. Even though white men make up just 30% of the US population, they hold 70% of all corporate board seats. Of this Fortune 250, there are only 7 CEOs that are minorities. And of the thousands of publicly traded companies today, thousands, only 2 are chaired by black women. And you're looking at one of them, the same one who not too long ago was nearly mistaken for kitchen help. So that is a fact. Now, I have this thought experience that I play with myself, experiment. When I say, imagine if I walked you into a room and it was of a major corporation like ExxonMobil, and every single person around the boardroom were black, you would think that were weird. But if I walked you into a Fortune 500 company and every around the table is a white male, when will it be that we think that's weird too? And I know how we got here. I know how we got here. You know, there was institutionalized and one time legalized discrimination in our country. There's no question about it. But I still, as I sort of grapple with this issue, my mother's question hangs in the air for me. How did they treat you? Now, I do not raise this issue to complain or in any way elicit any kind of sympathy. I have succeeded in my life beyond my wildest expectations. And I've been treated well by people of all races more often than I have not. I tell the uniform story because it happened. I cite those statistics around corporate board diversity because they are real. And I stand here today talking about this issue of racial discrimination because I believe it threatens to rob another generation of all the opportunities that all of us want for all of our children, no matter what their color or where they come from. And I think it also threatens to hold back businesses. You see, researchers have coined this term color blindness to describe a learned behavior where we pretend that we don't notice race. If you happen to be surrounded by a bunch of people who look like you, that's purely accidental. Now, color blindness, in my view, doesn't mean that there's no racial discrimination and there's fairness. It doesn't mean that at all. It doesn't ensure it. In my view, color blindness is very dangerous because it means we're ignoring the problem. There was a corporate study that said that instead of avoiding race, the really smart corporations actually deal with it head on. They actually recognize that embracing diversity means recognizing all races, including the majority one. But I'll be the first one to tell you, This subject matter can be hard, awkward, uncomfortable, but that's kind of the point. In the spirit of debunking racial stereotypes, the one that black people don't like to swim, I'm gonna tell you how much I love to swim. I love to swim so much that as an adult, I swim with a coach. And one day my coach had me do a drill where I had to swim to one end of a 25-meter pool without taking a breath. And every single time I failed, I had to start over. And I failed a lot. By the end, I got it, but I got out of the pool, I was exasperated and tired and annoyed. And I said, why are we doing breath-holding exercises? And my coach looked at me and he said, Melody, that was not a breath-holding exercise. That drill was to make you comfortable being uncomfortable, because that's how most of us spend our days. If we can learn to deal with our discomfort and just relax into it, we'll have a better life. So I think it's time for us to be comfortable with the uncomfortable conversation about race. Black, white, Asian, Hispanic, male, female, all of us. If we truly believe in equal rights and equal opportunity in America, I think we have to have real conversations about this issue. We cannot afford to be colorblind. We have to be color brave. We have to be willing, as teachers and parents and entrepreneurs and scientists, we have to be willing to have proactive conversations about race with honesty and understanding and courage. Not because it's the right thing to do, but because it's the smart thing to do. Because our businesses and our products and our science, our research, all of that will be better with greater diversity. Now, my favorite example of color bravery is a guy named John Skipper. He runs ESPN. He's a North Carolina native, quintessential Southern gentleman, white. He joined ESPN, which already had a culture of inclusion and diversity, but he took it up a notch. He demanded that every open position have a diverse slate of candidates. Now, he says the senior people in the beginning bristled, and they would come to him and say, do you want me to hire the minority, or do you want me to hire the best person for the job? And Skipper says his answers were always the same, yes. And by saying yes to diversity, I honestly believe that ESPN is the most valuable cable franchise in the world. I think that's a part of the secret sauce. Now, I can tell you in my own industry, at Ariel Investments, we actually view our diversity as a competitive advantage. And that advantage can extend way beyond business. There's a guy named Scott Page at the University of Michigan. He's the first person to develop a mathematical calculation for diversity. He says if you're trying to solve a really hard problem, really hard, that you should have a diverse group of people, including those with diverse intellects. The example that he gives is the smallpox epidemic. When it was ravaging Europe, they brought together all these scientists and they were stumped. And the beginnings of the cure to the disease came from the most unlikely source, a dairy farmer. A dairy farmer who noticed that the milkmaids were not getting smallpox. And the smallpox vaccination is bovine-based because of that dairy farmer. Now, I'm sure you're sitting here and you're saying, I don't run a cable company. I don't run an investment firm. I am not a dairy farmer. What can I do? And I'm telling you, you can be color brave. If you're a part of a hiring process or an admissions process, you can be color brave. If you are trying to solve a really hard problem, you can speak up and be color brave. Now, I know people will say, but that doesn't add up to a lot. But I'm actually asking you to do something really simple. Observe your environment. At work, at school, at home. I'm asking you to look at the people around you purposefully and intentionally. Invite people into your life who don't look like you, don't think like you, don't act like you, don't come from where you come from. And you might find that they will challenge your assumptions and make you grow as a person. You might get powerful new insights from these individuals. Or, like my husband who happens to be white, you might learn that black people, men, women, children, we use body lotion every single day. Now, I also think that this is very important so that the next generation really understands that this progress will help them because they're expecting us to be great role models. Now, I told you my mother, she was ruthlessly realistic. She was an unbelievable role model. She was the kind of person who got to be the way she was because she was a single mom with 6 kids in Chicago. She was in the real estate business where she worked extraordinarily hard, but oftentimes had a hard time making ends meet. And that meant sometimes we got our phone disconnected or our lights turned off or we got evicted. And we got evicted, sometimes we lived in these small apartments that she owned, sometimes in only 1 or 2 rooms because they weren't completed. And we would heat our bathwater on hot plates. But she never gave up hope, ever. And she never allowed us to give up hope either. This brutal pragmatism that she had, I mean, I was 4 and she told me, "Mommy is Santa." She was this brutal pragmatism. She taught me so many lessons, but the most important lesson was that every single day she told me, "Melody, you can be anything, anything." And because of those words, I would wake up at the crack of dawn. And because of those words, I would love school more than anything. And because of those words, when I was on a bus going to school, I dreamed the biggest dreams. And it's because of those words that I stand here right now, full of passion, asking you to be brave for the kids who are dreaming those dreams today. You see, I want them to look at a CEO on television and say,
All right. So, and then you could put the PowerPoint back up. One of the things that was shared in that video that I hope that you caught was her swimming story and how her coach was teaching her how to be comfortable being uncomfortable. As we progress today, and as we're about to go into breakout rooms and learn how to have courageous conversations, I want to bring up one quick point. In the video that I shared and in the conversation that we're having, we are leading with race in this conversation. Let me share with you quickly why as we go a little deeper. Race touches every dimension of diversity there is. Whether you're one with a disability or able-bodied, race touches that. Whether it's someone from the LGBTQ community, or if it's a veteran, or if it's not a veteran. It doesn't matter, race touches it all. So oftentimes when we lead with race, we're able to find the intersectionality and talk about those from other dimensions of diversity as well. And it is probably one of the most uncomfortable conversations that take place. So with that said, let's go over some rules of engagement. And then let's be color brave. Let's create a brave space and let's just have a conversation. If you could start the PowerPoint. All right. You could go to the next one. All right, so just real quick on the bottom, and you can put this in the chat for me, it'd be really helpful. Why do you think it's so difficult to talk about race and equity in workplace and institutions? If I could get some answers in the chat, that would be wonderful. Why do you think these type of conversations are so difficult? Fear of offending someone, definitely. There we go. I appreciate this. Thank you. Yeah, so there's a few that really stand out, right? That you all share. One is that fear of offending somebody. You know, the fear of saying something wrong, the fear of saying something that's harmful, right? And so that's where that cultural humility and that grace really kind of, you know, is so important. It's also that fear that you might be labeled or judged because of a lack of knowledge around something, right? Nobody wants to be looked at as a racist. Nobody wants to be looked at as someone who judges other people or, you know, makes those type of mistakes. So that fear gets us quiet and it takes away from the bravery of having the conversation. I'm hoping what I'm about to share with you now will enable you to have the bravery that it takes to have brave conversations. With that said, we go to the next one. You've heard of safe space and you've heard of brave space. What I won't do is go through all of this because I believe you'll have a copy of this and you'll have a chance to keep it. But there are a few things I'd like to share. When we hear of safe space, right, rules of engagement, in conversation or even in spaces. Tell me if this doesn't sound familiar. Things like, well, let's agree to disagree, right? Don't take things personal, challenge by choice, show respect and no attacks. They sound so good on the surface. But what happens when we take these type of safe space guidelines, we don't really understand how much that it protects the dominant culture in the room, and really does silence those that aren't part of that dominant culture. To give you an example, to agree to disagree. If we're in a room and we're disagreeing and most of the people are from the same, dominant culture or belief, and they say, you know what, well, we'll just agree to disagree. Basically, as someone who might be in the marginalized community, might just feel like, okay, no change. Like at the end of the day, I don't even feel like I was heard because we're just going to agree that we don't agree. And so how could we, instead of doing that, what Brave Space says is it's all right to have controversy with civility. We could still disagree and continue the conversation that we might have a chance to learn another person's perspective. When we hear things from Safe Space that might say, don't take things personally, right? Like don't judge. Okay, I won't take things personally. I get that. But at the same time, you have to own the impact of what you say. Like, don't take things personally is not a free pass just to say what you want to say and do harm. So we all have to realize that, that when we speak, that we have to own whatever the impact is that, that we share. So own your intentions, and your impact. The last few I'll go over, just as an example, before we get to the guidelines for today, is around respect. Like people say, you know what, respect people in the room, respect as we move forward. Okay, and who gets to decide what respect is, right? It's kind of like professionalism. Who gets to choose? I get emotional. I do. I get animated. I get to move with my hands sometimes, and every now and then I might clap when I talk. Is that disrespectful, right? Or is it me, really having the opportunity to, express, the best way that I know how? So, and then last but not least, and hold on a second, my screen just went blank on me. Oh yeah, no attacks. Like I get it. We don't want to attack people, but just because we disagree, just because I might even wave my arm and get excited about what I share, be culturally aware enough to know that that's not me attacking you. That's me fully being able to express a feeling or an expression that I might have. And if I argue with you, or it sounds like it's an argument, it sounds like, we're not agreeing, don't see that as an attack, but more so as, continue of a conversation, even if it's a different opinion that might come. So I'm not saying safe space doesn't have a place, because safe space is really about building a space of security where a person feels like, they're not attacked or they're not being judged. But in order to really move a conversation, you got to move to brave space. And so with that being said, here are going to be our guidelines for today. We could go to the next slide. For today, oh, you can go to the next one. For today, we're going to follow Courageous Conversations. I got that book right here. Glenn Singleton, who happens to be a friend of mine, has these 4 agreements around having a courageous conversation. Really great. It's what we're going to use today, but I'd like to explain just a couple of them. Stay engaged, right? I think that speaks for itself. Stay engaged as much as you can, lean in as much as you can. Resist this. Resist the feeling of, I usually talk too much. I'm just going to sit back and listen, right? Because usually those that say that aren't that engaged in the difficult conversations, So what I'm trying to say is lean in these conversations. Now, if you're a person of marginalized community, and you're always having to have these conversations, and sometimes you're the only one in the room and it gets too heavy, I understand that, right? I understand that kind of leaning back, because you have to be engaged in this conversation all of the time, and it's exhausting. For those who don't, I really need you to lean in and stay engaged. To speak your truth, remember this, we should not argue with anybody's truth. That's their experience. That's their truth. You may not agree, you may not understand, but we don't argue with somebody else's truth. What we can do is ask for clarification, that we might have the opportunity to learn more. And we can share our truth, but we don't want to disrespect somebody by saying, you know what, that's probably not what happened. What probably happened was, or no, it didn't go like that, right? Because that's that person's experience. And then the last one I'll share is experience discomfort. If you don't feel a little bit uncomfortable about the conversations that you're having, then you're probably having the wrong conversation today. You ought to feel a little bit, right? Nothing to fear, but you ought to feel a little bit uncomfortable, because if not, you're not.
Dion is frozen on my screen. Is it frozen for anyone else?
Not challenging yourself.
Yeah.
You're not talking about what you're really thinking. You're just trying to say what you.
Again.
Hey, Dion. You're freezing on us. I wonder if we turn off video, if that will help with connection. I think we might have lost Dion. Hold on tight. We'll figure this out just a minute. All right, Dion's back.
Oh, my apologies. I do not know what happened. I might need to pay my cable bill, but glad to be back. Okay, so yeah, so the last piece was around that discomfort. So with that said, I hope everybody's feeling pretty good. We're about to engage in conversation. So we're going to break off into rooms of about 4 or 5 people. You're going to have roughly around 15 to 16 minutes in each breakout room. I'm going to show you a slide. And once again, we're going to start off by just putting your toe in the water, right? Not too deep of a question, but but deep enough that you can go deeper if you like, or kind of stay more in the shallow. But I hope that you challenge yourself in this. Remembering the rules of engagement. So let's go to the next slide and see what the question is, shall we? Oh, okay, we won't do this one, just because I don't have time. I was just going to do a little, well, yeah, matter of fact, go back a second. Let me see where people are. Can we go backwards one? So real quick, in the chat, put a number up. Where are you feeling? Number 1, I would rather not talk about race or racism. 2, I'm very comfortable talking about race and racism. 3, I'm usually uncomfortable. 4, I'm sometimes uncomfortable. 5, I'm usually comfortable talking about it. So where are we? All right, I see some 5s and some 4s, some 3s. Okay. All right, good. Nice. I haven't seen anything lower than a 3. Okay, see a 1 that's out there. All right, we hear you, we see you, and we love you. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and jump in there. All right, here's the question. Let's first just put our toes in the water, shall we? Discussion number 1. Growing up as a child, what was said or what was taught about people of other races in your household? Or what wasn't said? Now, before we go to breakout rooms, let's think about that for a minute. What did you hear growing up? What grandpa say? What your mom or dad or whomever you grew up with say about people of other races? Or maybe nothing was ever said. Why was that? Why was it not a conversation? So I really want you to stop and think about it, right? What was said or what wasn't said? And then if there's time, how have your views changed over the years around what you heard growing up? So you're about to go into breakout rooms. You'll have about 12 to 15, no, yeah, around 15 minutes to have the discussion. One thing that I ask, as you go into that room, once again, you can share as much that you feel comfortable with, but also be aware how many are in your room so people have a chance to speak. We'll come back in 15 minutes to see how that went. And then we're going to have a different question that's going to go a little bit deeper. And so if you didn't have a chance to answer in the first one, then you might be asked to ask in the deeper question. So, so if this one is one you're feeling good with, you might want to go with this one, right? So with that said, you will go into the breakout room.
Yep, I will send everyone over in just a sec. Are we ready,
Okay.
Dion?
Well, when you get there, please take a moment to introduce yourself. So everybody, everybody might not know everyone. Once you've had a chance to introduce yourself, then please engage in the dialogue, in the conversation. Be humble, be brave, show grace.
All right. Just a second. You'll be sent directly to your rooms. And then when it's time to come back together, I will send a pop-up that tells you you have a minute to come back. It'll give you the option to come at that time. And if you don't click anything at all, don't worry about it. It'll automatically bring you back into this main room. And I'm also going to pause the recording now so that the conversations happening in the breakout rooms are not part of this recording. Just hang a moment.
All right, so hoping that went well, hoping that you all realized that was just, us putting our toe in the water in the conversation. But this is what I'm hoping for more. I'm hoping for more that you challenge yourself a little bit. So a few things before we jump into this next question, and I hear a little bit about how things went. One is, it only really takes one person to be brave that really can encourage other people to be brave in the conversation, right? It takes one person saying something that's just, that could be admired, that sits back and says, wow, like, okay, this might be a safe or brave space to be able to share. So I'm hoping that you did that. If you didn't, I hope that you will in this next one. The other thing that I'm hoping that the conversation went well. And that whatever fears that you had going into the conversation, you realized was, just an illusion, and that you were able to share freely and follow the rules that were out there. Also, a good practice in the midst of a brave conversation is thanking people, right? When somebody takes that chance and shares something out, to really take time to say thanks, because, at times you might share something and feel vulnerable, and then no one says anything. I mean, you sit there, you almost feel like you need a blanket or something, right? You just kind of feel by yourself. And so for someone to say, thank you, or I appreciate, or I hear you, I see you, can mean all the, make a big difference, when speaking. So with that said, what I'm going to ask is to give me a thumbs up, a thumbs to the side, or a thumbs down on how the conversation went. All right, see some thumbs up, see some thumbs up. All right, see one side. Okay, all right. Okay, thumbs up. I see you all in the chat too. Okay, all right, y'all ready to go a little deeper? Okay, let's jump in a little bit deeper. So let me give you a little a little background or context on this next question. First thing I'll say is everybody, and I do mean everybody, carries bias, right? We all carry bias. We all carry, sometimes hidden, sometimes not hidden prejudices, isms, all those things. And they show up at different times. You can't live in the world that we live in today and not pick up stereotypes and thoughts and things that, that aren't inclusive and sometimes damaging. We don't like to admit those. We don't like to talk about those because we like to have the idea that we're good people. And I'm sure we all are good people. But that doesn't mean that we don't get these thoughts that come through our heads. And sometimes it's a default that we have to override. With that said, and in the work that we do, we might as well tie to our work. In what ways have you not shown up for individuals or families and or staff of color or other marginalized communities? Where have you come up short? Where have you let a personal bias stop you from engaging like you should have engaged? That stopped you from interrupting a microaggression when you heard something or saw something that you knew that was wrong. Or maybe you yourself were accused of a microaggression towards somebody, right? We don't like talking about those things, but we have to learn to talk about these things. That's how we grow. You know, we're not going to grow in denial. So in other words, where did you let your implicit bias or hidden prejudice stop you from being an ally or support? And then also, you know, you'll have the chance to share what you could do differently if we have time. So that's the question. So before we go into the room, I'm gonna ask you to take a moment to think, right? To challenge yourself. Because you've made a mistake in the past doesn't mean that's who you are today. It just means that you're brave enough to say, ooh, me too, like, me too. And I do it all the time. I've put my foot in my mouth so many times. I've caused so much harm in this work, but I've learned how to apologize. I've learned how to change behavior and to be able to admit it without getting lost in guilt and how to show even grace to myself. I hope to share those tactics with you once you get back, but I want to give you all your full 15 minutes. So you're about to jump back into a breakout room.
I'm going to try and put, oh, go ahead, Dion.
No, that was it. They're about to go.
All right, I'm going to put you back, I think, in the same rooms you were in before, to the best of my ability. I'm going to recreate those rooms. Make sure when that pops up on your screen, you click join to go into your breakout room, except for Elizabeth, Emily, Missy, and Dion. You're all going to hang back here in the main session, and I'm going to pause recording and we'll come back together at 2:17.
Wonderful, thank you. So, there we go. Let's see here. All right, so I'm hoping people who didn't have a chance to share the first time was given the opportunity to share the second time, hoping that you all were able to thank those that did have a chance to share. More importantly, I'm hoping that you challenge yourself once again to get uncomfortable, right? What was the question? Asking around our own prejudices, right? Asking around our own biases, mistakes that we've made. Where we've come up short in our job. Those are never fun conversations. So I hope that feeling of being uncomfortable can get to the point where you realize, ooh, okay, but I did it, right? But you were still able to kind of get through. Because there are going to be times in our job, in life, you know, in anything, that these type of conversations are going to be of great importance. So with that said, we don't have a whole lot of time, but there are a few things I want to share with you. One is we've got to talk about what to do when you've messed up, because we've all done it. And I think it's that fear, right? That if we do mess up, that, you know, life is just going to be hard for whatever reason. And we don't know if we'll be able to recover or what the case might be. So let's talk briefly around that. I have some great resources that are embedded in the PowerPoint. And so if you want to pull up the PowerPoint one more time, Missy, I will show you all, since I'm giving you all access to the PowerPoint. This one right here, if you actually click on this page, a video will come out. And my friend here just does a wonderful job of what to do when you've made a mistake. Like, it is, I so much appreciate it. And the tips that she shares, I often use. I will say this though, around making mistakes, is I've made many in this role, right? There's so much I don't know and so much I need to learn. And I'm grateful for those who are willing to help me, you know, in this journey. With that said, I have made mistakes where I know I've offended somebody. I felt it in my soul, and I saw it all over their face that I truly offended them. What I needed to do, by all means, everybody knows, I needed to apologize. I went to apologize, you know, from the depths of my soul. Like, one of the last people I probably ever wanted to hurt. They didn't want to hear it. What I did, they did not want to hear my apology. And you know what I had to do? I had to accept that, and I had to step back. You can't force your apology on anybody, right? I mean, if they're not ready, because of whatever pain, what's ever going on, you've got to respect that. We don't want to make two mistakes, right? And feel like, you know, we're so special that, you know, what you have to otherwise. No, you have to be able to show grace and give them time. The second thing is in my apology, although deep down inside, it wasn't my intention, I did not even bring up my intention. I did not lead with my intention because my intention didn't matter. It didn't matter how good my intention was. The impact ended up being harm, and that's what I needed to address. Now, not saying intentions aren't important. Intentions are important. I'm not saying that. But if I just hurt you or harmed you, and I'm telling you why I did it, does that feel good? No, that doesn't feel good to anybody, right? What people want to hear, first of all, is that you've acknowledged and seen what you've done, the harm that you've done, and to be able to speak to that piece towards the apology, not so much, the intention piece. So back to what I've done, what I had to do is, once I offered the apology and they weren't ready, now I had to go back and do some self-reflection, right? Because now, Dion, where did you go wrong? What knowledge were you missing? What emotional intelligence clues weren't you catching that caused you to make this mistake? And so once I was able to do some reflection, now I'm able to do some change. Because believe it or not, the harm that I did was in a presentation just like this. And to make a long story short, I had someone share who didn't want to share. It was too painful. But remember, my rules of engagement, stay engaged, right? So I was trying to say, oh, but we promised we'd stay engaged. Won't you speak? And they spoke from a place of pain that they didn't want to, because they were the only person of color in an all-white group. And for them to share a place of pain on this particular topic was unforgivable at that moment. And so that's why even in my new rules, I say, hey, stay engaged unless you're you're not part of that dominant culture and you want to sit back because you always have to be engaged. That's where that caveat to that rule came. Because in my self-reflection, I had to go back and realize, oh, I just can't say I'm sorry. I've got to move different. I've got to believe different. I've got to do different. And I rechanged how I do this whole presentation. And one of them was that I was going to give context. So people knew when they came in what we were about to do, so they could prepare themselves. Before, it was break out into conversations and let's have them. Not anymore. As you see, I had to set that context and I had to put your toe in. Let's go a little deeper. Let's go a little deeper. I made some significant changes to how I'm moving. That's part of an apology, right? Apology is not saying, hey, I'm sorry. Part of that apology is, I'm sorry, I'm gonna move different. Like, I'm gonna do things different. I'm gonna be different so I don't keep causing the same harm. And so after I was able to make those changes and I was able to apologize, I will admit it took probably around 5 or 6 months before this person talked to me again. And when they did, they ended up forgiving me. It meant the world to me. It did. It meant the world to me. But I also understood how much humility that I had to have, right? But with that humility, I also had to learn how to forgive myself, because I walked around for that first month like, I can't do my job. This was like a few years ago in a different role, but I was still a manager over equity. I second guessed my own worth. Like, I don't even know why I'm in this work. Like, if I'm harming people, Dion, why are you leading this work? I had to forgive myself. I had to show myself grace, right? That was a little bit hard, but I was able to get there. So I say all that to say, yes, this comes with risk. Yes, we make mistakes. And yes, there's a way to apologize. This video does an awesome job. There's also a link, a book that's called So You Want to Talk About Race, which is just one of the best books I've ever read on the topic. That gives some real life examples of how to have these conversations, some great context, and what to do as well when we make mistakes. And so I say all that to say, although it does come with some risk, it's worth being brave so you could be authentic, so you could grow, so you could learn, and we could tackle some of the tougher issues that are out there that sometimes we just don't talk about because we're afraid. So the humility of great importance, the grace of great importance, the bravery of great importance. When you've made mistakes, apologize. Don't lead with your intentions. Understand the impact that you've made, and understand that sometimes the timing, might not be great. The last thing I'll say on this piece before I want to hear from you all is sometimes a public, a private harm deserves a private apology. And sometimes a public harm deserves a public apology, right? Well, if it's just you and I've said something that offended you, then, right then and there, I need to say to you that, my apology. Sometimes if I'm in a meeting and I say something that's offensive and everybody had a chance to hear it, sometimes I need to, let everybody know, you know what, in that last meeting, I said something that was inappropriate. And I want to apologize for, I know better, I'm gonna do better, whatever it takes. So just little things to remember. I just so appreciate you all to come into this and being willing to engage in these type of conversations. I hope the more that you're able to have brave conversations, the better off, that we are. Sometimes setting the stage with people asking, hey, is it okay we have a brave conversation? So that they know ahead of time that, hey, you know what, we're gonna have a heart to heart here and a soul to soul over something that's important to one of us, very deeply. So with that said, you could go ahead and flip to the next slide. I'm gonna fly through these just to show you what you all have. This was going to be our third question, but we don't have time, so you can reflect, personally on this one. So we'll jump to the next one. Final thoughts, definitely want to know what new perspectives did you learn from listening from others, right? Please feel free to take advantage of this chat on this. Yeah, what perspective did you learn? What lesson or reminder? For some of us, this is just reminders of things that we sometimes forget. What came up for you? Please put it in the chat. Please share with others lessons learned or perspectives that you got, or something learned from your group, from hearing from others in your group. And how will this new perspective shape your thinking, right? When I made a mistake, it changed how I did everything. And so hopefully, we'll be able to share the same. So although some are coming in chat, if there's a few people that wouldn't mind raising their hand and just sharing out, I'll have Missy look up to see what hands come up. If you wanted to kind of share out, you can leave that up just for so they can see the question. For a question or one or two, to share a perspective that you've heard, something you learned from the group, or just a reminder. I see quite a few in the chat, but would love to hear from you all personally. Go ahead, be brave.
Katina, I see you're off mute. I just want to see if you had something you wanted to share over the mic.
I don't see any hands up yet.
Okay.
Oh, I see Roberta. Go ahead, Roberta.
I think that today there was a really good reminder to myself, and also probably a deeper understanding of the reality that people live and how that truly informs them of how they view the world, but also how they interact with the world. And I just want to say, sometimes for me, it feels hurtful that people can't understand. It feels almost like people ignore you purposefully because they can't see what you can see, and they can't feel what you can feel. And I think that it was insightful to understand a little bit deeper that if you are the person in the room and there was no blue in the room, therefore maybe you can't see blue the way that I can see blue, if that makes sense. So I think it made it clearer. I think it made it safer to a certain extent, to truly understand that from people that I spoke with. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your bravery, and thank you for speaking your truth. Definitely appreciate that.
Sandra, I think, is next.
All of it was powerful. I think hearing another person's story of being raised where racism was prevalent, in an odd way, made me not as embarrassed, but made me feel like somebody else understood that piece of the struggle, which I know is not the point here, but The most powerful thing I think was when you talked about don't lead with your intention. For some reason, the light came on with that. And I feel like that's probably what I do, is try to come in to apologize for my mistakes by explaining my intentions. And it makes so much sense why you wouldn't do that, because I don't. When somebody does that, I'm not sure that that's helpful to me either. So I really appreciated that.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for sharing. I know we're just about out of time. I mean, we all can admit 90 minutes probably is just isn't enough time, right, to have these type of conversations. But you have the PowerPoint now. So not only do you have the PowerPoint to be able to, you know, relook at some of the things that were shared. There is one more slide after this. That's just another resource. It's the book that I shared. And actually, if you click on this particular link that's right here in the middle, it will take you to the page that talks about what to do when you've made a mistake, right? It just kind of jumps right there. But I do want to take a moment just to thank you once again, to keep you all encouraged to continue to have these type of conversations and encourage your teammates, your groups, family members. We're just better off when we can communicate. One thing that I have learned is we're in best relationships with those that we communicate with best, right? And so being able to have brave conversations allows us to have better communications, which allows us to have better relationships. And what's better than a great relationship? So thank you all for allowing me to share with you all today. I give you back to your leader.
Thank you. I don't know that I'm anyone's leader. Thanks so much, Dion, for sharing all of this with us today. I will email it out and with the resources, although those links will be available to you. And Dion, if folks have more questions and they didn't get a chance to ask today, is that all right if they email you or email Missy?
Yeah, please do. I've been getting a lot of Dear Dion's lately. So
Excellent.
yeah, feel free to, and I can put my email in the chat unless it's already available.
And when I send out the slides and a short survey about today, I can copy you on that email so that everyone has you there.
All right, sounds good. I appreciate it.
Thank you all so much for giving us your time today and for being brave with us. Thank you. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.